Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first quarter Outsider Insights webinar. It's great to see so many people joining us for a topic that's very top of mind. For those of you who may not be familiar, Outsider Insights is our quarterly webinar series. We share what we're hearing from mid-market CEOs and private equity firms that we talk to every day. What are the questions and challenges they're dealing with, and how are other companies managing those same challenges successfully? So if you enjoyed today's discussion, go on to our website to find future topics. But let's talk about today's topic. Today's topic is AI, and that probably doesn't surprise anyone. It's something that comes up constantly in our conversations. The question we hear isn't about technology. It's more practical. Where can AI actually create value for my business? And that's what we're going to focus on today. So joining us, you'll see we have 4 of our chief outsiders. Ed Valdez, who will talk about where AI is heading, and then Aaron Gutowski, Denise Steinbring, and Anka Twum-Baah, who will share 3 real-world examples of how mid-market companies are applying AI in their businesses. And we'll leave some time at the end for questions, so feel free to submit those as we go. Before we hand it over to Ed, though, I want to briefly frame why we're focusing on AI today. So this chart comes from a McKinsey study conducted late last year. What you'll see is that among all of the business functions, sales and marketing are the ones that report the most measurable revenue impact from AI. This isn't just about improving efficiency. AI can drive real growth and value creation, especially around go-to-market motions. And that's what we want to talk about today. So with that, let me turn it over to Ed to talk about what he's seeing in the market.
Thank you, Dawn. I'm going to set the frame for the next few minutes because everyone in this webinar is already being affected by AI, whether you're deployed or not. The question is whether AI matters to your business and how you're capturing the value. So let's take a look. When you look at the next chart on this slide, there we go, you'll notice that from the bottom to the top, this is how often professionals are using AI on a daily basis, weekly basis, or on a yearly basis. And you see that only 10% are using it daily, but we're about to cross a threshold. AI-powered search, not Google, not a keyword search, AI. And McKinsey's estimating that $750 billion of revenue will flow through AI-powered search by 2028. So think about what that means for your marketing and for your SEO investment, even your content strategy. The top of your funnel is moving upstream into AI. So you might assume this compresses the buyer journey, but it's more complicated than that because Gartner found that 31% of consumers spend more time researching after they see an AI summary versus 16% who spend less time. So the journey isn't shorter, it's restructured. The discovery game has changed. Next. Here's where we're seeing some measurable gains in 4 different areas. In targeting and segmentation, 66% of marketers are now using AI in their roles, something that Dawn was talking about. And in terms of speed of insight, Gen AI for research and summarization is saving 1 to 2 hours per day per professional. Bain has found that in sales enablement, 30% of your sales win rates are improved by AI-enabled sales. And Aligo found that 51% of revenue teams say that AI is shortening their sales cycles. So think about what every sales leader should be doing next. In fact, if you use AI, sellers spend only 25% of their time selling, so you get your time back and you can redirect it to the highest value conversations. It's not theoretical, it's happening now. So on the next slide, we're going to see a few missteps, just 4 of them. The first mistake is thinking that in your business, you need to think about tools first. In fact, what you need to be thinking about is what problems need to be solved. Bain's really explicit about this. that says that we need to apply AI to existing processes and make sure that those work streams are re-architected in a way that AI can make the biggest gains. The second mistake is that 20% of leaders say that there are no AI policies that exist, none. And what that means is that by 2028, a quarter of enterprise breaches will trace back to AI agent abuse because there's no policy involved. Third mistake is that there are no decision rights defined. We have to define what does AI do and what do humans do. And the fourth mistake is we need to tie AI to measurable business outcomes, to KPIs that matter, and measure that value in your business. So next, where is AI headed? And what we're seeing here is that AI is moving really fast. It helps you do tasks and helps you automate workflows. In fact, McKinsey says that high performers in business are 3 times likely to have restructured your work by having AI get things done differently. And the next phase we're calling Agentic AI. 23% of organizations are already scaling AI agents. And Microsoft basically said that the future organization is built around human agent teams. It's not only AI, not only humans, it's this hybrid organization. BCG is saying that this year is the turning point. So what's next? How do you activate it? Well, take a look. What's next is that we have architected a very simple RISE AI readiness assessment. And RISE stands for the 4 stages in the AI maturity journey: responsive, integrated, strategic, or exceptional. And if you take this assessment, only takes a few minutes, chiefoutsiders.com/AI, you'll be able to find out not only what stage you're in, but what are the steps you need to take in order to advance to the next stage. And we're very prescriptive about this, and leveraging some of our services can help you do more. So on the next slide, you see what those 4 stages are, but I'll leave it to Dawn to give a quick reminder at the end. But the bottom line is, as we conclude here in this section, in the next slide, is that the opportunity is real, but only when you apply AI with discipline in those 3 steps: strategy first, workflow second, and measurable outcomes third. So thank you, Don. I'll hand it over back to you.
Terrific. And I think what we'll have is Aaron talk next about a real world case study.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Don. So I want to just tell a story about a client that I had just in the past year. They are a large electrical contractor. They have a couple of locations, one in Arizona and the other up in the Bay Area. They're PE-owned firm that pieced together these 2 operating companies. And both of these firms were facing declining gross margins. So they wanted to counter this by coming up with a more robust offering around preventative maintenance. The typical service they provide is design and then construction of electrical infrastructure, and also break-fix work. They wanted to come up with a preventative maintenance service offering, and they'd only dabbled in it. They really hadn't come up with a go-to-market strategy. So that's what I was asked to put together. I put together a go-to-market strategy around this preventative maintenance service offering because it had very rich margins. And as part of the go-to-market execution piece, I needed to create a sales tool so we can generate more demand for these services. So we came up with the idea, let's do a white paper around the cost of non-compliance when it comes to your electrical service operations. So that white paper, we had a framework, but we didn't know what kind of compliance laws were out there. We just thought, well, let's leverage AI. except they were a little bit nervous about the security with AI. So we have something at Chief Outsiders called the GrowthGears operating system. So what I was able to do was put the parameters for this white paper in our GrowthGears operating system, which is a platform which leverages all our previous engagements. We've done 5,000 engagements with our clients ever since we've been in business. And it takes the best practices that we've done and it zeroes in on, here's a white paper we created, and we were able to leverage that best of breed content. So it came out with a good first draft. We were able to revise it and then roll it out to our existing client base to generate interest in preventative maintenance, so you don't get faced with big fines around non-compliance. Ultimately, it was a big success. We were able to hit our entire year's annual target within 90 days of rolling out and implementing this solution. So that's just a real simple example of how we were able to leverage it and also utilize our GrowthGears operating system.
Terrific. Thank you, Aaron. I think next we're going to move to Denise.
Hi, everyone. So I wanted to share an example of some work I did with one of my clients. This is a emerging medical device company that sells simulators to hospitals so that clinicians can practice adverse events in, high risk types of procedures that happen with low frequency. But if they do happen, they're catastrophic to the patient. This is a very niche market. And as they were starting to gain sales experience, I had them on HubSpot for about a year, but it was still a very manual process for the rep to be able to figure out, how to target more customers at scale to make this whole sales engine go faster. So we decided to build 3 different AI agents to automate some of this manual workflow. And the first one was a lead discovery agent. It went out and looked, scraped the web for leads that we were not possibly familiar with. In addition to hospitals, there are simulation centers that buy simulation products, but this was not a segment that we were in at the time. So through that agent, we were able to uncover 1,600 new leads that were unknown to us that went into the funnel. Agent 2 was then built as an outreach agent. So it would do a lot of research around what was happening in that account. Were they trying to get certification through one of the professional societies, moving from silver to gold to platinum? What was the impetus for them being in the market for a simulator? And so based on all of that intelligence, the agent would actually write the emails and put them in an email sequence so that the rep simply had to come in every morning. We did a batch of about 100 to 200 emails per day. And the rep simply had to review some of the content that had been written to make sure that we weren't saying anything crazy, which is a great call out for people that are using AI, right? AI is not the answer. You still need human intervention with discernment and people who have domain expertise and know the industry to make sure that everything is legitimate and personalized and true. But this allowed us to go a lot faster since we had one sales rep and now we had an agent who was writing emails for us en masse. And then the third agent was a lead scoring agent that would take their engagement with some of our email sequences. It would look at different signals of intent and it would give the lead a score. And anything that was scored 85 or above went directly to the sales rep to, do personalized calling and follow-up, whereas the rest of the leads went into the funnel and they went through other types of journey content that we served up to them. So all in all, this was a bit of an experiment at about the midpoint of last year. We learned a lot of things like when you have a prospecting agent and they pull data into your CRM, you get a lot of duplication of contacts sometimes. So we went through some deduping of data to make sure that it was clean, that we only had one contact that was the right contact in the account. But the long and short of it is that at the end of the year, we had generated 71% of our annual revenue in the back 6 months of the year because we had launched these agents. So it really allowed us to do personalized outreach at machine speed. It improved our sales efficiency. It brought us additional revenue, and we didn't have to add any additional heads. So it's a definite go, I would say, from a demand generation perspective. There's lots of other things you can do to add on to these types of agents, whether they're going to go develop content for you based on what they know about these types of things. But this was a good first step for a small company to kind of prove what these agents can do. And I think we had a great result.
That's terrific. Thanks, Denise.
Denise,
So-
I got to say that when I see what you and Aaron have shown and presented, what business wouldn't want to achieve their annual sales in less than a year's time, right? So I can't wait to see what Anka has to say.
And Ed doing it without adding another person.
Right.
Great point.
Yeah. So Anka, why don't you bring us home?
Sure. I have quite a number of companies that I've worked with over the years that have leveraged AI. But one of my favorite examples is an East Coast-based fintech company. They'd recently gotten to roughly 150 million. And they were just struggling with lead gen. Originally, a lot of their growth came from word of mouth. They had a couple of key people within the organization that were rainmakers. And they brought in, a lot of the contacts that eventually became customers. But I think, as with many companies, right, that sort of either word of mouth or someone's Rolodex runs dry quite quickly. And so what started to happen is, their growth started to flatline quite a bit, and they weren't sure what to do. It's a thin margin business, managing merchant transactions. And it was heavily in a competitive, sort of niche component within fintech. So they didn't have the luxury of adding tons of headcount, and they needed to figure out, a clever way. And so in working with them, there was a lot of pressure to grow revenue. At that point, we were in the middle of Q3, right? So, the heat is on in terms of driving growth. But we leveraged quite a few AI tools that made all the difference. And while certainly, those within the company, but also the board as well. So what we knew pretty quickly is we didn't have the right infrastructure to support. There were a lot of processes that were manual or Excel sheets, what have you. And so the first order of business was to just look through a HubSpot that was haphazardly being used, but really have that as a functioning, high-octane, AI-driven CRM. So within HubSpot, there's an AI tool, and we created these contacts which acted like profiles within the tool. And we basically told, HubSpot, through the AI components of HubSpot, to look at these profiles, and if there was incomplete information, if it was stale, just remove it. So basically do a contact clean within the database, right? So that we could focus on, leads that really mattered. So in about 5 days, leveraging the AI tool within HubSpot, we cleaned over 200,000 contacts. And we realized very quickly which are the ones were quality and which are the ones that weren't that great. We use Seamless AI, another very easy to use AI tool to update contacts with, phone number, missing phone numbers, missing emails and such, to make sure that, whatever outreach we did, it was landing in the right place. We leveraged AI lead scoring to help give us a bit of a scorecard on how valuable a lot of the lead sources were. I certainly within fintech, but I think in quite a number of industries, sometimes you buy call lists, right? And you don't know the quality of the list. So within lead scoring, we were able to leverage that AI tool, again, to just look through and give a bit of a diagnostic of what which contact would be the most valuable. Now, within many companies, I don't think the situation is unique to the company that I worked with. you want to send out campaigns. You want your campaigns, whether it's via email or social, to be read, and then there would be some action taken, right, by your perspective. Now, the fun part, I think, sometimes of being a marketer is developing these campaigns, but in many companies, there are varying perspectives on what is the right campaign. So from the headline to the imagery to the creative, sometimes the color, should you add media, should you not add media? The product team wants to make sure that the product and service is positioned well. The salesperson wants to make sure that, it's very pithy and to the point. And marketing, wants to use all of the tools that's in its toolbox to showcase the right campaign. So with this particular company, there were a lot of perspectives on what the right campaign should be to attract that right lead. And so what we quickly found out is we had all these different permutations, so many different perspectives. And this is where AI tool Ad Creative AI was super helpful in making sure that, we can develop different permutations. So what we did is we developed a bunch of headlines, developed a bunch of creative, and developed a bunch of text. And AdCreative.ai was able to create 730 permutation of ads. And so with that, over the next handful of weeks, we've just tested them. We released the campaigns and did A/B testing and, made the best campaign win. By the end of our testing stage, we were able to effectively narrow it down to 10 ads by persona that were effective. So it was a huge relief. I remember back in the day, if you wanted to test out campaigns, it was at least a 6 to 8 month process, and it was done extremely manually. But with this particular tool, producing 730 permutation within a number of hours, we made some tweaks because, we had to finesse some components, and that's where the human ingenuity comes in. But to test that volume, that scale within, developing it within a matter of hours was fantastic. And so we were able to get to market very quickly. As I mentioned earlier, this was in the middle of Q3, so we didn't have tons of time. But the results sort of speak for themselves. Like, we were very quickly able to see amazing results. So just to give a before and after, maybe we would get a couple hundred leads a week or in every 10 days. We were getting 3,274 leads within the first 30 days, which was fantastic. Now, did all those leads become, a closed win? No, but at least we were starting off with a top of funnel that was wide enough. We were able to convert qualified leads more than 50% of the time. Our sales qualified leads, above and beyond, which always makes the sales team happy when the marketing team can provide, great leads. We unlocked pipeline opportunity. We had all of these new visitors to our website because we had campaigns. We tested out whether should they go to a website, should they fill out a form. And then within the first 30 days, we closed 29 deals, right? And so this just goes to show you, I don't think we did anything hyper complicated, but with the right AI tools deployed at the right time, we were able to drive results in a really critical time of the year. So again, fantastic ways to use AI in one of my favorite companies.
Fantastic.
So Anka, what a result. So you only 55x your SQLs and showed us how to close a deal a day, basically.
Essentially. Yeah, because we allowed AI to do the heavy lifting for us. All right. And so I feel like so much of managing that top of funnel, you're always kind of digging, searching, fishing, but you never know if you're fishing in the right pond. And it often feels like stars have to align for it to work. But this is where AI just allowed us to be a lot more productive, a lot more efficient.
Nice.
And Anka, how did you go through those 730 permutations of creative, right? How did that be an efficient process?
Yeah, I would say two ways. One, I highly doubt we would have been able to do this manually. Just the volume, I think we probably would have stopped at 50. Number two, in a neat way, a sort of unplanned way, it became a fun exercise internally for the company, right? Because everyone was kind of betting on whether their campaign idea was going to be the best one. And so there was a form of, all hands on deck to drive the top of funnel for the company. And so we started off in tranches of 50, every couple of weeks we would A/B test. but we got through them really quickly because with the AI tools, certainly within Ad Creative AI and then AI embedded tools within our channels, it was clear which were the emails that just weren't resonating. It was very obvious over time which ones weren't resonating. So once we figured out, what was that headline that was a great hook? What was that image that was very compelling? What were the sentences? And to some extent, even changing keywords, that meant a lot depending on the persona. We started to whittle away the campaigns that weren't bringing value very, very quickly.
And what a great way to get fast feedback. Something we all want. So I'm going to bring it back home with all of us. I want to actually summarize some of the things I heard. And then I've got one more final question for everyone before we go to Q&A. So a couple things I heard. One is AI's here, and AI agents in particular are growing. And it's a great way to augment, accelerate, and amplify great processes. Thank you, Ed. That's his way of talking about it. And then we reviewed a few specific use cases, right? Leveraging best practices and frameworks to accelerate high-value content, using AI agents to find and personalize outreach to the right targets, cleaning and scoring prospects, building and testing campaigns. And the great thing is every one of these showed how you can use those to accelerate business results and drive a sales pipeline without adding overhead. Of course, the other thing we heard, I think, in all of these was the need for human intervention and oversight in the process. Did I miss anything, guys?
Great summary.
Cool.
That's it.
All right. Well, then before we wrap up, I have a lightning round question for each of you. What is the one thing CEOs should focus on right now relative to AI? Ed, I'll start with you. And then you can pick the next person.
Every CEO I've spoken to says that they want to have an AI use case workshop. In other words, identify what are the use cases they could apply AI with, what value is that going to capture for them, and what can they start with quick wins.
So who's next, Ed?
All right, Aaron.
Yes, I would say it has to do with getting everybody comfortable with a standard set of at least one tool or tools. So standardize on what you're going to use and make sure you're vetting those before you do. And then to also make sure that you triple check the results to make sure you've got the right results, because AI is not foolproof, as we all know. And don't find out the hard way by publishing something that is incorrect.
Actually, implementing what Aaron said will prevent shadow AI, right? Uses of AI that you don't know what's going on, but could be potentially damaging to a company. So thanks, Aaron.
So Aaron, who are you to say next?
I'll go to Anka.
Sure. I would say I've done AI workshops all over the country, and the big number one question is, how do I start? Because it feels extremely daunting. And this is where my response typically is, there's probably AI functionality right underneath your nose, right? So maybe within your CRM, maybe within some other tools that you already have embedded within your company. So, maybe that can be that first step or that initial step. But I would say, using a few tools and getting alignment on consistently using a few tools can go a long way. You don't have to reinvent the wheel with AI in every single itsy bitsy part of your organization, because that can feel overwhelming. But select a couple of tried and true tools that are valuable, get alignment and consistency around usage, and that can push the needle of your organization quite significantly.
And what you said, especially about any HubSpot or Salesforce users out there, is just turn on AI where you already have it, but may not be using it. So great advice.
And so Denise, round us up.
I would say jump into the pool, right? Come on in, the water's warm. AI is here to stay. And if you haven't jumped into the pool yet, you're probably behind. So it's something that CEOs need to be talking to their boards about, right? And AI is no longer just an IT issue because it touches risk and strategy and talent and ethics and compliance. And so this is a this is a big rock, right, that you need to have a strategy for. Boards need to be governing, the data privacy, cybersecurity, things of that nature, and regulatory pressure is mounting. And so you need to put a strategy in place, and there's lots of people out there that can help you, along with just doing some internal reading on your own, right? There's the NIST AI risk management framework. There's ISO standards that govern some of this. The World Economic Forum puts out an AI governance toolkit. So there's ways that you can educate yourself to become comfortable with this big rock that's going to disrupt your business and the way that your customers buy from you. But the sooner that you get insights and help, and phone a friend if you have to, or call one of us, we're happy to do AI workshops. We're happy to do an assessment, as Ed talked about earlier. But it's not all that scary once you actually dive in and see kind of what it's all about and what it can actually do to help you accelerate your growth.
Yes, I will say I am constantly amazed at the power of AI. So we're going to move into questions in just a moment, and we won't hit them all. In the meantime, just to close out this portion, if you want to continue exploring this topic, you can visit chiefoutsiders.com/AI. That's where you will find the complimentary AI readiness assessment that Ed mentioned, as well as a replay of today's webinar and additional insights and resources. If you want to look at other topics from our webinar series, those are online as well. So let me move on to some questions. And I think the first one we'll give to you, Ed. How do they get started if someone's interested?
All right. Okay. Yeah. So a great place to start would be going to chiefoutsiders.com/AI, where there are actually two assessments. You can either take the AI readiness assessment or the AI search assessment. And in just a few minutes of your time, you can get actionable recommendations that you can apply and get a few quick wins in your business, and schedule follow-up calls so we can help you more.
Great. So the next question I'm going to give to Denise. What do we need to think about to prevent uncontrolled AI usage, security concerns, which you mentioned, or out of control execution?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to the governance structure where, the board really needs to sort of set the AI risk appetite. How much risk is acceptable to that particular company, overseeing the strategy alignment to ensure that whatever you're going to do with AI aligns to your business objectives, ensure management accountability and structure, who owns it internally, and then review sort of high stakes AI use cases like hiring, lending, things of that nature. So I think it's, some things for them to avoid might be, treating AI governance as a one-time checkbox rather than ongoing oversight. Make sure that you have a contingency plan in place for any kind of cybersecurity attacks. We get questions even because we are outside in, right? We are outsiders coming in to help companies. So how are we protecting client data? So make sure that you have a plan, to protect company assets and data privacy and be compliant with any regulatory requirements like GDPR in Europe, for example. But just start with, doing an AI inventory audit. As Anka said, it's probably right under your nose. People are using it today that you might not be aware of, and it's time to kind of get your arms around that and do an audit. And that's a good place to start.
And I should mention, if anyone else wants to chime in, I'm just assigning people. On that note, why don't I take two more questions? So, Aaron, I'm going to give you this one. What level of investment should people expect to spend?
Yeah, absolutely. So to the point earlier that Denise made about existing, you probably already have AI in some of the tools that you're already using in your environment. So that cost is already set. You're paying for it. You're just not getting the return on it. So I would start there. Another easy way is to, I'm just going to give a little commercial here. If you engage with Chief Outsiders, you will get access to our GrowthGears OS, which is an AI-enabled platform that gives you the ability to use AI in a secure fashion and also leverage all the existing content that Chief Outsiders has already created for other clients. You're getting best of breed content. So there's that. And that's really, it just comes with the monthly investment for the Chief Outsiders, and our engagements have a range anywhere from starting at 5,000 per month investment on up to as high as 50,000 if you've got a couple of people, let's say. But it's the GrowthGears OS is included. I hope that helps, Dawn.
Yep.
Could I piggyback onto that, Dawn?
Sure.
Yeah, I like what you mentioned, Aaron, and the recommendations. And I do want to say, in terms of some of the tools that you could use, there are a number of folks that are using some of the free large language models like Gemini, Copilot, or ChatGPT. But I will say, stop using free, because just investing $20 or $30 a month will get payback within a couple of days of usage. It helps you save about an hour a day in whatever you do, whatever your role. So definitely consider investing there. That's per user, $20 to $30 per user. And then consider having one of the AI workshops that we offer, like AI 101, AI use case workshop, or the AI audit that Anka was mentioning. Because just for a few $1,000s one-time fee, you get the benefits of leveling up skills during that workshop, identifying your most important use cases, or understanding what you have under the hood so that you can leverage AI for a better outcome and better value.
So Ed, since you mentioned Gen AI tools, could you do a real quick 2 seconds on the difference between Gen AI and Agentic AI in case anyone isn't familiar?
Yes, and the way I summarize each is with one word. So generative AI basically is like an AI assistant, and AI assistants ask. In other words, you gotta prompt them in order for them to do something. And they said, well, what else do you want me to do next? They ask you what you want to do. But agentic AI, or using a series of AI agents, basically act. So they don't ask, they act. They, with a prescribed set of instructions that you help define them, what they do versus what you do, they act on your behalf with the directions that you've given them. And obviously, always it's helpful to have a human in the loop. So bottom line is Gen AI, AI assistants ask, and agentic AI acts. So that's the key difference.
Terrific. Thank you. And I'm going to squeeze in one more question, and I'm going to give it to you, Anka, since you haven't had one yet. You talked a little bit about this, but can you talk a little more about how you measure ROI on the investment?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there are a variety of ways to do it depending on what you're leveraging. Some of the low-hanging fruit is just hours saved, so more of a productivity. So how efficient am I doing the same task? That task that used to take me a couple of days and maybe 2 people, maybe it takes me a couple of hours and I can do it by myself, especially if it's a repetitive task. So, gains in productivity is usually a great ROI marker. Sometimes it's speed to market. So one of the ways that my clients like to use AI is, let's say, pulling together content. So maybe what might have taken a bit of a team to either record or create the content, slice and dice the content, and so on. I talk a lot about my earlier marketing days where there are times where it would take us 4 to 6 months to develop something. And we can do it in a matter of days or maybe a week or a few weeks if you're going through several rounds of edits. That way you have your, let's say, creative resources focusing on the creative and maybe not some more of the kind of heavy lifting administrative tasks of developing content. Another way is certainly, revenue generating, and some of the stats that I showed in the previous slide earlier on this webinar demonstrates that, where because of productivity, we were able to, do iterations very fast, right? So we're able to fail fast and learn very quickly and make those changes and head right back out to market. It's hard to do that manually. And so, because of that, we were able to find our groove, or to find, let's say, that right campaign mix or that right target customer segment quickly. So we're able to realize those gains and revenue quickly, right? And so regardless of industry, just the idea of being more productive, putting humans where humans need to be, and a lot of, I think there was wisdom and discernment, Denise, that you mentioned, and less on the heavy lifting, is great, right? Because, then humans can provide what humans, are able and very well equipped to do. And then third, we want to see that revenue number go up and not down. And so how quickly are you able to, realize those sales, right? And so, all those metrics tied to that are incredibly important and relatively easy to track, especially if you have AI used consistently.
That's great. I love the idea that you're getting insight to allow you to focus where it's actually going to make the most impact.
Right.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
Gartner just did a survey, and they found that 85% of CMOs, chief marketing officers in these businesses that we talk to every day, don't believe that they are savvy enough from an AI perspective. And so as the CEO, I would put out a challenge to your team to get educated, right? Everybody needs to be upskilling and taking their game to the next level. And so then another way to measure ROI is, what is the AI maturity of your organization over time?
Mm-hmm. That's a great comment to close on. We are out of time. So if we didn't get to your question, we will follow up with all participants and post the answers on our site. So check the site, chiefoutsiders.com/AI for the replay and, again, the complimentary AI readiness assessment. Have a great day.